Thank you all for dialing in for our special segment on deterring IP theft of your curriculum, as well as how to then generate additional licensing revenue from it. That's the topic of discussion. And in the first 20 minutes, we'll discuss what various IP laws are actually at your disposal and how your training curriculum might fit into that. First, take a look at what you have put here for us in terms of what sort of training you conduct. By the way, if you are a lawyer, feel free to just write lawyer. So we have a number of you in leadership roles. I see business development, business processing, cultural communications, and let's see, one final one, perhaps inclusive hiring. Great. Thank you for all of those contributions. I'll give you just a handful of seconds more just to hit the submit button in case you haven't yet already submitted. Please do so now. Because I have a couple of additional questions as we get to know you a little bit today and the sorts of things that we will be discussing today. Hopefully we'll be making them much more specific to your requirements. These are the areas that we will cover. In the first 20 minutes, a bit of a look at the IP laws and how your training curriculum and your handouts, your PowerPoint slides, your frameworks, and all the IP that you bring to your training, how they might be protected by existing laws. But we'll also talk about how to ensure that your client respects your IP rights. And sometimes it's not just the client, isn't it? It's also the participants. In a few moments, I'll ask you what horror stories you might have to tell of participants taking your slides and hosting them on their own intranet. And then, of course, we'll walk you through how to use PitchMark to deter idea theft and get paid on time. I welcome your questions at any time. You could ask them simply by dropping them into the chat here in Zoom. You can also use Menti. If you look at your Menti screen at the bottom, it says Open Q&A. You can add your questions or comments there. And I guess one other way is for you to simply raise hand and unmute, and we can actually talk to you today. It doesn't have to be a one-way conversation at all. All right, well, let's see where you are from. On your phone, you might have to hit Go To slide and then just drop the pin in the country where you currently are at. I know it's a relatively small map. An approximation is okay. Just let us know where you are. Okay, so one person already from Singapore. Wow, one of you seems to be joining us from, now that looks to be either South Africa or Mozambique, Tanzania. A little bit hard to see on the map. If you're joining us from there, especially a warm welcome to you. Okay. Right, so looks like we have most of our guests from Southeast Asia today and beyond. Okay, on to our next question, and that is perhaps, again, just a very simple poll as to where you are coming from on this. Have you had clients or training participants who have copied your curriculum in the past? What's your experience been? Once again, just vote in accordance with that on your screen. And CL, who's just joined us, along with Dan, hello, welcome as well. Perhaps you'd like to also share your vote as to what's happened to you in the past. Hello, Campbell Soup, unusual name. Can you share with us whether you've had clients or training participants copy your curriculum in the past? So far, out of the 12 of you who have responded, it appears that actually most of you have had that happen to you. It looks like about 4 in 5 of you have either suffered this all the time where your curriculum is being copied, or it has happened to you at least on a few instances. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Final call for any input. Now is the time. Okay. And if not, just as I mentioned, just a handful more questions to get to know you. This one's a little bit longer. What is the worst case of IP theft you've experienced in your training business? Perhaps you have a story that you would like to tell in just a handful of words. What is the worst case of IP theft you've experienced? Okay, so this is what you've said so far. They've used your materials to teach in different ways. Yep, isn't that funny? Clients engage you for training, and then they think they own everything about your curriculum. And then they just share it internally without a single dollar coming your way, using my framework and then changing it to their content. Yep. And they possibly justify this to themselves. They say, well, we've already had, Jeffrey or Herman or whoever take part in, give us this workshop, so now we can just derive a new version from it. Program content gets copied from the website. Isn't that just the dilemma? Clients, prospects always ask you, can you tell me a little bit more about your workshops? What sort of training do you conduct? What's the program? What's the agenda? And then you send it to them. And then they devise their own content. Or it seems like you've actually got some content on your website and that's then gone astray. Unfortunately, it's a product idea which cannot be IP done. Not sure what you mean by that. Maybe you'd like to clarify. Participants accuse my team presentation was theirs. Wow, it sounded really. So it sounds like this has been the reverse scenario for you. You've actually been accused of taking somebody else's, even though presumably you would argue it's yours. Good to know. We'll come back to that. Someone left the organization and used the materials to set up a rival company. Don't you just hate that? And then, so that obviously gets into employment law as well. What does it say in the employment contract? That would be interesting to know. Slides reprinted in trade publication without consent, attributed but reproduced without your approval. And again, people justify this to themselves, right? We always think about the law. It's very black and white. But in actual fact, people then try to find gray areas. They think that they can get away with stuff. Oh, never mind. As long as I attribute it, it's going to be okay. When it clearly isn't. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Step-by-step or your framework that was absconded with. Yep. That's it. So they pay at the start, but then the relationship ends. Thank you for submitting this one. Then they think they can just continue with your materials even after the relationship has ended. Awesome. I'm pleased that you mentioned that. We'll come back to that as well. Corporate clients would like to have your content frameworks, own the copyright. Yep, we'll address that. And there is an expectation to provide the slides beforehand so no one ever knows where it goes. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if you could just send the slides and then when somebody opens it. It's very hard to make watertight. Anybody could take a screenshot, of course, but it's about managing those expectations. So thank you all for your contributions. If there's maybe one or two more, just hit submit because I'm about to advance to the next slide and then your answer won't be captured. So just hit submit now, going, and gone. All right, just one more question that I have for you. And that is this one here. Again, just a very simple vote. Here it is on the screen. Well, and so it seems we're all agreed. The law can't fully protect your IP rights. So what can you do? That is, of course, the reason why we are on this call. Step number one, get yourself informed. What are your rights? The overarching theme that you'll hear again and again on this call is that the law is in place, but to avail of it, time-consuming and problematic simply from, in some instances, the amount of registrations and things that you need to go through. And inevitably, the only thing that we can truly try to do is to come across to the receiving party, that is the people, the clients, the prospects, the participants, as somebody who's got this all locked up and has got it all watertight. The law might be black and white, but the truth is that actually then exercising your rights is full of gray areas. And the more you can work on deterrence, the better. And if you have in any way ever been involved in any form of legal suit, you'll know how time-consuming, costly, and so on it is. Let's take a look at some of the laws that you might avail. I've dialed up the website here of IPOS, and I encourage you to check it out for yourself. This is the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. Patents, take a look. Yep, so if you can patent your invention, do so. Get in the know about what's involved in the country you're in, about what's involved in getting a patent. If you can patent it, do so. Yes, it's costly. The patents usually go jurisdiction by jurisdiction, one country after another. Takes a long time. If you can patent your invention, do so. The only problem, of course, is that when it comes to training courses, that probably doesn't apply. So what else is there? Trademarks. Well, perhaps you are in the design business or your company, your training company has a specific logo. If you can trademark your logo, do so. Very simple. But as you can see here, differentiating of products and services with a trademark is also not necessarily feasible when it comes to training courses. By the way, there are some great descriptions further down here on the site that I would encourage you to read. So, as you can see here, it's mostly about your logos. So that's not necessarily going to deter any idea theft of your curriculum. So what else is there? Copyright protects the expression of ideas in tangible form. And here we're getting a little bit closer because your slides are protected by copyright. You write them, you design them, it's your voice, has to be your original work, of course, so nobody else lays claim to it. But you could then say, yes, I own the copyright. Great. Doesn't cost you anything. But, just because the law recognizes that you have the copyright doesn't mean that you can just forget about it. At the very least, as it says there, put the C symbol, the copyright symbol, into your slides. The number of times I see trainers display their slides on screen, no copyright notice, not even their name, not even their logo is on the slide. So let's get professional, folks. Let's make those slides look great. Logo, contact details, and critically, of course, copyright, the year, as it says there, right? Followed by the year, as well as the name of the copyright owner. Do it. Signal that you know what you're talking about. And there are other laws. For example, and again, I invite you to look at the website of IPOS in Singapore or the Intellectual Property Office of the country you're dialing in from. There are other things that you can protect. For example, things like geographic location. So champagne, for example, can only be called champagne when it comes from the Champagne region in France. Similarly with certain varieties of cheeses. Plant varieties. So there are some designs. There are so many things that you can actually take legal steps to protect and talk to your lawyer, get in the know. But what we then end up concluding is that there are a whole range of things that actually we can't protect. And training courses and curricula are among them. The word protect in and of itself is a problematic one because our assumption is that once we've got the copyright, we are protected. When in actual fact, if there is ever a copyright breach, these are your choices. Litigation or deterrence. Let's look at them. Take a look. The cost issue, for starters. Prevention is just so much cheaper than the cure. If you've ever been involved in a court case, you know that it's going to cost you thousands right up front. Not only the financial cost, there's also the time and effort and resources cost involved in litigation. Take a look. And then there is the relationship the thing is that as soon as you take legal action against a client over copyright breach, breach of your moral rights to your IP, you can kind of kiss that relationship goodbye. And we'd know that in reverse, right? If somebody tried to sue us and say, hey, you've done me wrong, are we really going to go back to that particular vendor? So, the fact is that if you're trying to close the door after the horse has bolted, then yeah, you are going to have that problem of not being able to count on that customer anymore. Besides, as it says there, damage is already done. The horse is already bolted. Then there is this. The courts are independent. It's up to the courts to always decide. Sometimes it goes our way, sometimes it doesn't. And then you've spent thousands of dollars and many hours on trying to defend your IP rights after the breach has already happened. Ultimately, litigation, the law, is a reactive thing that you would avail after the fact. As I said earlier, you get a patent, perfect, do it. If you can trademark the name of your training company, do it. Indicate the copyright on all your slides, on all your handouts, along with the date, your name, email address, phone number, so that people know you are laying claim to the documentation. But all of that on its own is probably not going to be enough. How do we prevent this sort of thing happening in the first place? And that is, of course, exactly what we are here for. What are your options? In order to deter people from helping themselves to your course materials, to your curriculum, the first thing that we can do is raise awareness of the fact that we are looking to say, this is our materials. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this using PitchMark. And we're going to walk through in the next 15 minutes or so how to PitchMark your materials so that, first of all, you create that awareness and also, hopefully, actually generate some additional licensing revenue. If you've not yet signed up for PitchMark, feel free to do so, pitchmark.net. It's free to sign up. This is my live account. So, of course, you log in and you end up on your dashboard. The first thing that you see is all of the different certificates that you've generated. Of course, the first time you sign up, there won't be any. So the first thing that we need to do is to signal to the recipient, we take our IP seriously. So today we're going to PitchMark something. What documents are you PitchMarking? This is where you would say training curriculum and who the file is for. Ideally, you would actually state the name of the actual recipient, because that way they are on notice that you take your IP seriously and you're prepared to defend it. They are on notice that you have registered your materials. They are on notice that you do know your stuff when it comes to IP rights, and that they shouldn't even try to rip off your ideas. So, for the sake of our exercise today, I'm going to put one of your names, Mr. Frank Rittman. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put your name over here. Of course, you can always put the company name. But remember, it is not companies that rip off your ideas. It's individuals. It's people. It's the client or the prospect that receives your email that's looking to engage you, maybe somebody in a learning and development department. It is the participants who are sitting in the workshop with you. It is the people who we are trying to influence. So just putting the company name doesn't really have the full deterrent effect as if you put the name or names of the people you're sending your files to. So in this case, what's the pitch for? Well, this is for our forthcoming soft skills workshop, right? Or you might even put the soft skills workshop. Why don't we do that? We'll put soft skills workshop June 9/2026. Something like that. And who is the creator? Now, obviously, you would put your name. Dr. Wong, you are asking, is it only applicable for documents? Can you PitchMark videos? Yes, you can. You can upload a variety of documents, images, AutoCAD files, all sorts of things. There are certain fairly generous file size, upload size allowances, concessions, and you can, PitchMark virtually any type of file. If it is music, of course, you might have additional rights. Creators department, so I'm going to put here, managing partner. There we go. That's always the risk of doing this live, isn't it? Everybody gets to see your spelling mistakes. PitchMark LLP. There we go. Okay, now select the work category. Training and facilitation, workshop development, and here we go, workshop deck. So I'm going to select these because clearly over time, you'll then be able to see what sort of content is most common. Hide from PitchFeed. So the PitchFeed is in essence the front page of the PitchMark website. So if you go to pitchmark.net now, what you will see is the various types, selection of PitchMarks that people have filed in the past. And the aim of publishing this is to signal to the recipient, the fact that you are receiving this document from me is public information. Anybody can go to this website and see that I have sent Mr. Frank Rittman these files. Of course, the files themselves are not public. We're simply saying this transaction, shall we say, or this, sending these files has occurred without publishing the files themselves. So please don't hide from PitchFeed unless you have a specific reason to. Then we're going to choose a file. And again, this is fairly straightforward, where I'm going to choose, let's see, what file am I going to choose? Here we go. As I take in some more of your questions, Akmal, hello, thanks for joining as well. What if there are 30 participants in one public training? Should I put everyone's name? Yeah, that's a really good question. In my experience, you've actually got people specifically asking for certain slides. And as cumbersome as it sounds, you can't tell in advance who of those 30 participants is going to rip off your slides. If you now were to say here earlier up here in this document, what company or person is the file for? And then you just say, oh, participants in the June 9 workshop. Does it really have that much of a deterrent effect? Probably not so much. So by naming them individually, then you have an opportunity to, signal to the receiver, you're on notice. People act very differently when they're being watched. And you can do this at any dinner party. Just get out your camera and start filming people. And you see how differently people behave. They've become all self-conscious. That's the effect that we're looking for. Thank you for the question, Akmal. Feel free to follow up if you have any more. And Simon, I'll just answer your question while you're here. You're asking, if the same document is extended to a group, do we need to repeat the new certificate? Yep, actually, that's what I was just offering. Of course, there's nothing to stop you from actually adding multiple names up here. So you could put, Mr. Frank Rittman, Mr. Lance Ong, Mr. Naeem Niran, Miss Jenny, Dr. Carolyn. You could add multiple names if you so wished. Briefly, you obviously want to only PitchMark materials that are actually yours. Now, on our side, there is nobody who looks through your documentation. So it is up to you to make sure that it is yours. Because quite clearly, if somebody then takes you to court and say, you're ripping off ideas, sorry, we can't help you. Then there's the AI question. Now, in some jurisdictions, AI-generated content is not protected by law. The United States might be one of them. In other markets, it's different. It really depends on each jurisdiction. If you did use AI to research, edit, or generate much or all of the content, then you might like to just pop that in here in this particular segment. And we're just going to put Google Gemini just for the sake of it. And we use Gemini to make our existing slides look nice. Okay, so I'm now going to upload that. You'll see it on the PitchFeed in just a few moments. And now what happens is that your document is being hashed, as it's called, on the blockchain. That means that we're actually not storing your ideas. Please do not use PitchMark as a repository of all your ideas. The documents are not stored on our servers. That's to protect you and to protect us. However, you can see here is the certificate, and you can click on that immediately. Ta-da! This is in essence what we just did. Right, so you now have the certificate. And the next step then, of course, is to say, what do we now do with it? Especially when we're in a training scenario and we want to now send it out to clients and prospects. Well, here are 5 ideas of what you could do, starting with emails. You can see a sample there on the left-hand side. Have a quick look. And you can see that in addition to the links to the PowerPoint and the PDF, there is very deliberately, discreetly, but deliberately, the PitchMark Intellectual Property Certificate. You can pretty much call it whatever you wish, but in essence, you would want to put that right up front in the email. Here is the link. Just copy this link from your certificate and pop it into the email text. Yeah, makes sense, right? Because that way the recipient, they're not forced to now look at it, but they can't ignore it. It's rather uncomfortably kind of sitting there in the email. If, of course, the client or prospect now says, Andrew, what is this, or Jenny, right, or Chris, or Dan, or Desmond, what is the certificate about? Great, now you can have a conversation about it. This certificate has now sparked a conversation that otherwise just doesn't happen. Part of the problem, part of the reason why people think they can rip off your ideas is because nobody talks about ownership. It's kind of gray in the background, swept under the table. Nobody really kind of puts it up front. That's why people think they can get away with it. Here's Lance or Lionel, for example. He sent an email and, well, he didn't mention IP, so why should I? Right? That's how the client thinks. And that's why a discreet little mention like this might just be the ticket. Okay, we move on from emails to quotations and contracts. Now, you're welcome to screenshot this if you wish. If you're still on Menti on your mobile phone, you can in fact just screenshot it on the phone. And in essence, here is a fairly lengthy paragraph and an excerpt of the certificate. You can see I've truncated this one a little bit for our own training. But I'll leave it to your discretion. Showing the certificate within the quotations or contract, again, very discreetly signals to the recipient, we take our IP seriously. We know what we're doing. Don't try to rip us off. If you now have a client who says, well, I got to tell you, Shermin, or Juan, as a result of you putting this into the contract, we don't want to work with you. Well, think about it. Do you want to work with somebody as a trainer who tells you up front that they object to you asserting your intellectual property rights? What does that tell you about this prospect or client? Maybe you dodged a bullet. Maybe this is actually a good way to sieve out all of those people who were actually thinking of just taking your slides and absconding with them. In which case, the certificate really has done its job. Be glad that they're not hiring you. Anybody who's willing to just anyhow rip off your certificate, rip off your IP, not pay you for your IP, is not a client. They're not a prospect. At best, they're a charity. At worst, they're a parasite. So put the certificate in and see what happens. High likelihood they won't say anything. They'll sign on the bottom. Great, more evidence in case they do the wrong thing. If you do now see your slides copied, or as one of you said earlier on, right, they've actually published them in a trade magazine. Here's the contract. You signed on the contract. And that's an important distinction. When we talk about IP rights, we're often talking about, copyright, patents, designs, trademarks, and so on. But by putting the certificate into the agreement, you are now turning what is usually an IP conversation into a contractual obligation. Different laws apply for contracts. This is now a contract law issue. And that's also why you see at the bottom here, we are asking the recipient to actually check the box to explicitly disclaim that they wish to license it. Or, of course, to say, yes, we want to license worldwide or by countries and until such and such a date. By putting it into the contract, you're now once again involving them in a discussion which otherwise usually doesn't take place. Cool. Haresh, hi, thank you for your question. You're asking, what if it's an in-house training delivered to a group of staff from the same company? Can we just insert the company name? Well, Haresh, this depends a little bit on the company you work for. Presumably you're a full-time employee, in which case your contract might have certain obligations that whatever you create as part of your employment relationship belongs to the company. You probably know that already. But why not just put the names of the participants? Which brings me, in fact, to the next slide. When you then flash that certificate with all the participants' names, you can see that here in the mock-up PowerPoint slide. You flash that as part of the agenda. Now people are once again on notice and will hopefully make them think twice about screenshotting, photographing, publishing, sharing your slides. You don't even necessarily have to talk about the certificate. Just go through the agenda of your workshop, your training courses as usual. Well, people will soon see, oh, okay, Harish has got this, what's that PitchMark certificate thing about? Okay, I'm going to scan the QR code on that PowerPoint slide to see where it takes me. Maybe it yields a discussion, maybe it doesn't. But at least you've now put it on the agenda. And you can hear I'm repeating the same thing over and over, that we are looking to persuade people because, as so many of you acknowledged at the beginning, the law does not fully protect you. You still would have to act on the law. On to LMS video content. Let's say you are in fact producing content in-house and it's venturing into a learning management system, an LMS platform. And I've got a screenshot here. I know this is rather hard to see. So here is an enlarged version of that screenshot. You can see that this rests on the Thinkific platform, but others work just as well. And again, it's a bit hard to read because this is an actual screenshot of an actual back end of a course. This is in fact the PitchMark IP Governance Certification Program for the client side of the equation. And you can see over here that there is a PDF file to download. And if you zoom in, you can see that this is a PitchMarked document of the same course materials. So learning management systems are another place where you might like to paste this certificate, such as the one that we just created. Printed handouts, probably the easiest one. You simply print the certificate, send it along with the handouts. If you are handing them out, make the certificate part of the handouts. Once again, what's the worst that can happen? That they somehow ask you about it? Isn't that a good thing? Once again, we're having a conversation that we otherwise wouldn't. So that then leads us to the second question, and that is, what happens if we have participants who actually do want to license our materials? And that's the next thing that I wanted to take you through. As you can see here on the screen, on the dashboard, we now have the opportunity to send an offer. So you'll recall, and I'll just zoom in a little, you'll recall that earlier on we had PitchMarked the certificate. There it is. And now we want to send the offer. We now have the offer document, or the opportunity to create this offer document here. Here, once again, is the certificate, which we just PitchMarked. And now we have the opportunity to actually license it. So this is step 2. We have already PitchMarked it, step 1. Now we are saying, all right, you do in fact want to license our materials. Here's how. Now we once again add the name of the person or persons who we want to license it to for a fee. Frank, don't mind, I'm going to use your name. The buyer work phone number. So I happen to know that Frank is in Thailand. So let's put 66. Frank, you'll, apologies. I'm just going to add a random number over here. There we go. And over here, we put in a price. So let's say I'm licensing my document to Frank. Oh, Frank, I forgot your email address. Here it is, frank@company.com. Right. And the price, we're going to put in a price of, let's just say, $1,000 US. We'll give it a title. What did we call it earlier? It was training curriculum for June 9, 2026 workshop. And any other notes that you'd like to include, this is the place to put it in. Now you've got some choices. How do you want to license it? In essence, you've got 2 choices. One is that you license this creative work while retaining full ownership. And that would be the norm. I mean, unless you're really selling your training business, you probably wouldn't change that terribly much. You can, of course, transfer the ownership of your creative work to a buyer who then says, who's then able to claim the idea as though it was theirs, as though they had the idea to begin with. Yeah, and that's clearly not what you'd like to do in most circumstances, I'm guessing. All right, and then we come down here, and now we add the licensing conditions. Worldwide or limited by country. If I were you, I would try to make it worldwide. Jenny, thank you for submitting this question. Jenny, you're asking, how about I give the online training and they record it privately and sell the video recording to the public? Yeah, I hear you. Make sure you have your own recording. PitchMark the recording. Display the certificate at the start of your course, just like I am now. Here it is. None of you can copy the work that I've been doing here on these slides either. Can we make this so foolproof that absolutely no one will be able to screen record, take screenshots, Jenny? No law will allow you to do that. No technology will allow you to do that. You're able to take screenshots now of my slides. How am I going to stop you? So what we're looking to do is to dissuade people from doing so by waving the big stick beforehand and saying, I take my IP rights seriously, right? I've mentioned that already. If they buy my docs through PitchMark, are they able to resell my docs privately, or can I take any action to avoid them reselling my docs? Thank you for saying that, Jenny. And yes, this is again why we are actually making a contract here. We're not just saying, we've kind of published something on the website and we now have the copyright. We're now entering a contract with people which has these certain licensing restrictions, so that if they do decide to resell your docs privately, you have a contract that you can sue them under, not just the copyright certificate. Now, hopefully it won't get to that for all the reasons I've already mentioned, the cost and all of those things. But at least you have now not just the copyright flag to wave at them, but a contract as well. Jenny, keep asking those questions. Happy to respond. All right, license validity. And we aim to finish at the top of the hour. So let's see that we can make haste. Let's say we want to license this only for the current year. There we go, Thursday, December 31st. That'll be the end of it. Can the licensee assign the license to someone else? In general, you would probably say no. And Jenny, for your question, that's probably the answer that you're looking for, right? You're explicitly saying you cannot on-sell or just, sign over my ideas to somebody else. Can the licensee disclose details of the creative works to others? Again, no. I mean, if the client then comes back to you and says, we'd like to advertise your course internally, and we'd like to, give a flavor of your course by publishing a short summary or maybe the agenda of your course, could you please give us the rights to disclose details of the work? Sure, you might then, in your generosity, say yes. But again, that is then a conversation that you otherwise wouldn't have. Is the license exclusive to this licensee? Chances are no, but it depends a little bit on who you are doing this for. If you have tendered for government work or work from multinational companies, you'll know that they often ask for the foreground IP, that is, the intellectual property you create for their specific instance of this course, this particular run of your course, as opposed to the background IP, which is all the intellectual property you use to create the foreground. And so in this case, you might decide that, yes, the materials that I've PitchMarked are in fact the materials, the foreground IP materials for this particular client. And yes, I am going to license this only to you, right? But once again, have that conversation. There are just a handful more before you send your offer. The grant of rights. Are they allowed to reproduce the creative work? So let's say your creative work is a poster, let's just say, and it has a summary of your framework, right? Allow the licensee to reproduce that summary. Over to you. Do you want to allow them? Do you want to allow them to reproduce this poster? Your decision. Or in fact, it might actually be part of the contract. Maybe what you're licensing to them is actually just a graphic design, and you're licensing it to somebody to, create coffee mugs with that design, or t-shirts, who knows? Then the answer might well be yes. Otherwise, the answer might be no, your choice. Allow the licensee to publish or publicly perform the creative work. In general, the answer would be no. Because that's the whole point, isn't it? You don't want some other trainer to use your curriculum. Allow the licensee to distribute the creative work. Again, perhaps you'll have a conversation with your client where they say, we really do want to create, distribute these handouts. Good. Make it a yes. Allow the licensee to create adaptations or derivative works. One of you put that earlier into your goals, didn't you? Where you said, no, I don't want them to do that. So once again, the answer here would be no. So now we hit send on the offer. And because this is now, again, a transaction on the blockchain, immutably so, this might take a few moments before that goes through. Please be patient. And in essence, you've now generated an email to the recipient, which will look a little like this. Here is the email, license agreement, and you can see that a number of the details, this is obviously a different email, but all of these details that you've just completed in that earlier step are now listed here, including the license validity at the bottom, along with the various rights granted by you in that earlier step. And of course, there is the sign-off at the bottom where you review and accept the offer. So this is now the email that the recipient receives. Your client receives. Your prospect receives. Right? This is the email that we've generated just now to frank@company.com or something like it. That person, when they click, yes, I accept, they are then invited to sign up for an account. 2FA, pretty important. We, of course, take that seriously. And then when they go to their dashboard, this is what it looks like. They are now able to see that they have been offered this document along with the price and the status currently pending. They click view, where once again, whatever you completed a few moments ago is visible to them. And then they accept and pay. And when they do, they add their email address and their credit card details. Even though this is a transaction on the blockchain, it is not actually in the blockchain, meaning it is not a crypto transaction. You actually get paid through Stripe, and in future you'll get paid through PayPal as well as some of your other payment providers, which will be added over time. Okay, so we're now back here. We've entered our credit card details, and this is once again the buyer side. You can see in the top right corner, they have accepted the license for the purchase price, and now they are able to go to their dashboard, and you can see that they have now gotten that article, in this case, article, and then they can view that. So it is that simple. It is like buying something online, Shopee or whatever it happens to be. And returning here to our own platform, we now go back to our own dashboard, and we would then, in the real scenario, we would then have an offer accepted, such as this one here. This is frank@company.com. There it is. There's the $1,000. So obviously I didn't see Frank's view of this in this demonstration, which is why it says pending. But again, you saw the process just now for where Frank would have been able to accept that, right? And then now you have licensed these materials. Fairly straightforward and simple. As we near the top of the hour, we now have 10 minutes left to take your questions. Once again, you can add them here to Zoom chat. You can also use the ask or open Q&A function in Menti. If you prefer, you can also raise hand and unmute, and we will gladly take your questions. The time to ask your questions is now. And while you're conjuring up your questions, let me also just remind you that we have our next workshop happening on Tuesday, the 9th of June. Our next discussion will be about tender documents. I referred to this a little bit earlier, that if you get invited to tenders, government tenders by multinationals, they often ask you to surrender the foreground IP, but it doesn't end there. If you've received tender documents in the past, you'll know that often they make you hand over your background IP as well. There are some fairly egregious types of documents. In some instances, we've seen tender documents with like 1,500 word IP clauses. And they all start very nicely. They all say, the vendor, that's you, continues to retain ownership of the ideas. But the ensuing, 1,500 words then all, in essence, say that they own virtually everything there is in your company from an IP perspective. So we're going to delve into that in detail on the 9th of June. You're welcome to bring your own tender documents that you've seen. Of course, we'd prefer not to see company names on those documents, as those companies won't be here to obviously, offer their point of view. But we'll be plucking apart what you can do if you're confronted by tender documents like that. So please get your questions in. We've only got 8 minutes left. Let's see. Yvonne, you're asking, is there any pending case in court where PitchMark is called as an expert witness for the authentication of the IP registered? The short answer is no, Yvonne, and we hope it stays that way. Because remember, PitchMark is all about deterrence. It's all about generating awareness. As we saw by your votes at the beginning, none of you seem to believe that the law protects you fully. So what choice do you have? You can generate awareness that you take your IP seriously. You can demonstrate to the client that you have taken steps to showcase your moral rights, your ownership, your authorship of your IP. You are prepared to defend it. It's all about deterrence because, as we also saw, It's costly to then shut the gate after the horse has bolted. It is troublesome. It will consume your bandwidth. It'll make you lose sleep at night. So we are invested in the deterrence up front. However, to answer your other question there, Yvonne, what happens if it does go to court? If you've ever been involved in court cases, you'll know that the more evidence you have, the better. Yes, you might say, well, I had this email. Okay, but did you explicitly rub the prospect's nose in it that you take your IP seriously? If not, once again, that's what the certificate is for, as an act of deterrence. We liken it a little bit like a steering wheel lock. If you're in Australia, for example, as some of you seem to be, you'll know how a steering wheel lock can also be broken, right? There's a car thief will come along, will smash your window, will, maybe bend your steering wheel trying to take the steering wheel lock off. But the fact is that looking through the driver's window and seeing that actually you've got a steering wheel lock on your car, they'll probably move on to another car. That's what the certificate is for. That's what PitchMark aims to do, to signal these ideas are locked up. Move on. I'm going to be too much trouble for you if you try to rip off my ideas. Right? So, Yvonne, I hope that has comprehensively answered your question. Okay, more questions. FK, hello. Thank you for submitting this one. What does the blockchain record or register if not the underlying document? Yep, so this is a fairly technical process, but the bottom line is that you upload your document. There is a so-called hash created. So the blockchain, as you probably know, is a general ledger of everything. It's a centralized shared ledger. And so the hash, this very lengthy code, which you saw earlier on the certificate, maybe I'll just pull up the certificate again. You see over here, this very lengthy code. That is, in essence, the hash. That is the blockchain registered descriptor of your document. And so the document goes through this hashing process. We now have this lengthy code, but the document itself does not reside on our server. You can see down here there is a verifier where your client can in fact upload your document and check that the document you've sent them is in fact the document that is covered by the certificate, right? Where you see this over here, you see this warning triangle. It'll turn into a tick when it's confirmed to be that. And that way we're able to process your document, but not keep it. So FK, hope that's answered your question. Feel free to ask again if it doesn't. Harish, does PitchMark get a cut from the sale of the document license fee? Well, there are, out of the transaction, Stripe takes its cut, as you would expect. That's how Stripe makes money, or PayPal, or whichever other platform that you'll see us on board in the next couple of weeks. And so obviously, if you get $1,000 in the sale, there is already going to be that platform fee, and the PitchMark fee is currently discounted. It's currently 3%. So yes, there is obviously a fee from the service. Grant, thank you for raising your hand. Did you want to jump in with a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to understand if you had a particular idea or you had a particular set of terminology and you were using it on multiple parties, would you need to register it again and again, or is it that you would register it once and then just redistribute to whoever you present it to?
Yes. Good question, Grant. The short answer is that it is in your interest to name the recipients at the time of pitch marking. I know that will sound troublesome, but remember, the whole point is deterrence. And the more of the recipient's details are on the certificate, the greater the deterrent effect. Now, earlier on in our conversation, we talked about the prospect of maybe adding a whole bunch of names, like if you're giving a presentation to a class of 15 or 20 people. I'll leave that to your discretion. But whatever creates that deterrent effect is what I would do. And you only need to swap hats to understand that. Imagine if somebody sent you a PitchMark certificate. wouldn't you then also say, well, I see Grant Tom is listed there on the certificate. Oh, okay, that's unusual. I didn't expect to see my name there. You perk up, right? You pay a little bit more attention. Any other points, Grant?
So when it comes to like, if there's multiple parties, but you don't really want them to know of each other, then it's a case of just doing an individual registration. Am I correct with that?
Yes, correct. And it's free to register, Grant. It's free to sign up for a PitchMark certificate. It's free to register.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question. If you have any other questions, now's the time. Please raise hand or drop them here into chat. James, or is it Janice? Do we need to register for the June 9 session? If so, how? Yes, please do. Go back to Eventbrite where you signed up for today's session, and then you'll be able to sign up. The invitation is not yet live. Perhaps we will just let you know once it is. But keep that in your diary. It is likely at around 1 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time on Tuesday, the 9th of June. Thanks for asking, Janice. Hope to see you there. Jenny, thank you for this question. You're asking, is this PitchMark, does PitchMark apply under Malaysian law, any other country? The short answer is yes, because remember, we are creating a deterrent effect. And we are saying, you can just go to PitchMark and see that I've PitchMarked this document. Your name is there in the pitch feed. It is the deterrence of the PitchMark certificate that counts. However, please check your local jurisdiction. Jenny, I get the sense you possibly are in Malaysia. Well, if you're across the causeway in Singapore, you might like to know that the Copyright Act in Singapore of 2021 actually has a lot to say about the original owner. There were certain controversial things that emerged at the time, for example, that wedding photographers, who owns the photos, the bride and groom or the wedding photographer? That was clarified in rather, there was a lot of discussion about that. In Singapore also, if you do not take steps to protect your ideas, quote unquote, protect by putting it behind a paywall or having specific disclaimers, your IP is also able to be used by AI large language models to teach those models. So it again is in your interest to take steps to deter or to signal that whether or not you allow such use. You're welcome, Yvonne. All right, Dr. Wong, thank you for your comments. And that leads us to the top of the hour. Apologies if I have missed any of your questions. All right, I did promise a prompt finish, and it is just after the top of the clock. Thank you all for your time and attention. Scan the QR code, sign up for PitchMark. It's free to sign up. It's free to PitchMark your documents. And I hope very much that we will be able to see you on Tuesday, the 9th of June. Thanks again, everybody. See you then.